So we are going to start in a couple minutes. Just going to give you guys, just in case you want to run, I'm not going to get into any of the weeds. I'm not going to get any of the specifics. I'm probably going to talk for half an hour. I want to give you guys, it's meant for beginners. It's meant beginners, or if you've been doing this a while, maybe some things you didn't know about the industry in general, about whatever. I'm not going to get into the logistics of how to publish or any of those things. I want to talk about the underlying parameters of this business. And so if you're looking for more, or you're looking for very specific details, the last 15 minutes, I want to open it up because I want to make sure I can answer your questions. And I will be around afterwards, so if you don't want to ask a question to a live hot mic, you can ask your hot question outside in the hallway afterwards. So I just want to make sure that you guys leave with what you were hoping to get out of this. And if not, maybe I can point you in the right direction, or someone way smarter than me to talk to you about it. But we have I guess a minute to go. It's 1:15, so we're going to start. Hello, welcome to the business basics of writing and publishing. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Just going to give you a little bit of a background. How many people know who I am? Okay, cool. So just at the high level, this slide's meant to do nothing more than impress you that I got to hand an award to Margaret Atwood and hang out with really cool people around the world. But I've been a writer since long before the internet. I started working in the industry in '92, so that does make it 30 years. I can do the math when I take off my shoes and socks. I've played various roles in the book industry. The most latest role is Director of Business Development at Draft to Digital, so there will be some positive bias towards Draft to Digital, but whenever you're listening to anyone, just be sure to check the bias that they're going to bring. As I said before we started, to the people in the room here, this is going to be a high-level look at the business of writing and publishing and book selling, just to understand the basics. We can get into the weeds later on. There will be room for questions at the end. It's meant for beginning writers, just the beginning of your journey, whether it's traditional publishing or indie publishing. I want to be able to just provide you with insights that can help you, I think. And if you're experienced, you may find some useful stuff as well. Now, some of the stuff is not necessary, but it might be cool. You could win a bar bet. It could be a great dinner party conversation for people. So there are some things that you may pay attention to there. I tried every once in a while to stick in a light bulb to go, oh, this might actually be important. It may not, but I put the light bulbs there just to see if you're paying attention. You can yell out light bulb if you want when you see those slides. It's up to you. But the takeaways that you get from this may vary. And there may be stuff I talk about that doesn't make sense now, but may make sense later. It may never make sense. But the reality, the thing I want us to all understand is that now more than ever before in the history of writing and publishing is we have the power. And I really wanted to put an earworm. I've got the power earworm in, and I would play that if it wasn't being streamed live, because then that would get taken down. But that's an important thing to remember. No matter how you're publishing, if you're self-publishing, you're in charge. You push the button and it's live somewhere. If you're working with a publisher, we often forget we're the creator of that content and we're deciding to license it to them. So just remember that power dynamic. It doesn't feel that way, but at its fundamental, publishing is about connecting readers and writers. Craig talked about that during the opening ceremony. It's that beautiful, magical connection of connecting with another human being. And it started in a different way with oral storytelling, and it's evolved into publishing. But that's really at the heart of it, understanding that this is about connecting readers and writers. Everything else is noise and work to make that happen. Publishing is a business of connecting readers and writers, and in understanding the business aspects, as passionate as we are about storytelling, as passionate as our readers get about storytelling, this is an important thing to remember, that this is a business that connects writers and publishers. And sometimes when we're publishing books, we make emotional decisions, but just remembering to make business decisions. A publisher may not decide to acquire your book because they may need to sell 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 copies in order to make their money back. With indie publishing, with self-publishing, that number can vary, and I'll get into a little bit of the numbers later on. But why do people read books? Well, people pick up books for a variety of reasons, but ultimately, when you look at it, it's to solve a problem. That problem may be, I want to escape, I want to enjoy something, I'm on the beach, I like this kind of story, and it solves the problem of entertaining them. It could be something that answers a question, but fundamentally, the book that they read or they purchase and they share or they talk about ultimately fills something, fulfills something, solves a gap in their lives. And that's the first sort of light bulb moment here is, and this is critical, so it's even critical to know before you've begun. for every single book, for every single project or series or thing that you work on, understanding what problem this book solves, for whom, is critical. And it's critical to understand before you begin marketing. It's critical to understand that when you're deciding the path that you want to choose for that particular book. Is this a book I'm going to self-publish into KDP Select? Is this a book that is going to sell better in print? Is this a book that is primarily going to be an audio? All of those questions come back from that fundamental as what problem does it solve, but it's also critical for understanding your pitch. And I'm going to show you some examples in a second. When you want to work with librarians, booksellers, when you want to work with retailers, distributors, remember that your book is fulfilling a problem. What's the problem that you fulfill when you publish a book to Amazon? What's the problem you fulfill when you decide to load a book to draft to digital to distribute to platforms? Well, the problem is having content to sell to consumers because everyone gets to pocket a little bit of money when you are successful. And so that's the problem you're fulfilling. And you may be fulfilling a problem to say, well, this book will appeal to readers who enjoy this kind of book and have already read this big name author and they're looking for something else. The other problem you may be solving is they may be able to get that something else, especially if you're indie publishing, for a much better value and a much better price. So it solves kind of two problems. I can buy 3 of their books for the price of one traditionally published book, so I can read for 3 times as long. And so you're big time solving major problems when you can get in front of the right people. But just remember that at every step of the way, this is a partnership. Whether you're working with an editor, an agent, a publisher, whether you're working to directly publish to a retailer or through a distributor, and ultimately all of those people are there to serve the reader, including yourself. It's always about that partnership. It's always about that collaboration. I've long said that publishing is going to continue to become more collaborative than ever before. We have that here with the 20Books group, and you see it on the Facebook group, you see it here in the room, you see it in the hallways, is that collaborative partnership of writers helping other writers. The successful writers like Craig, etc., being here to share their time and help you guys. That's a beautiful partnership, but it continues when you go back home and are publishing. So for traditionally published authors, I want to kind of understand, this is how I did a pitch to a publisher. This is Haunted Hamilton, which is 2012. It was traditionally published in Canada. Hamilton, Ontario is a steel town, kind of like Pittsburgh. And this was sort of the Venn diagram of the pitch. I visualized things. It was like, okay, this is going to be a book for people who like ghost stories. That's one demographic. The other demographic is people who are interested in history, because you can't tell a good ghost story often without history. And I know those who come from Europe are laughing at us in North America and say, you don't have history. You only have like a couple hundred years, not, etc. But that's fine. We still have our history. Or people who are proud of their hometown, people who love Hamilton. And so the ideal reader is going to usually fall in all 3 of those categories. It does not mean that other people in those Venn areas are not going to like it, but that's the ideal reader, and all of the marketing, all the energy is focused on those people, and we may also sell to some of the other ones. And that's how I pitched the book. And so there's a thing called comp titles in the industry. If you've heard comp titles, comp authors, this is an example where it's going to appeal to authors who have read these books, who are interested in these topics. And that's the basis of creating a pitch for a publisher, because I'm solving the problem. There had never been a book about ghost stories about Hamilton. So I had pitched a book of ghost stories about Hamilton. So I also knew that there were books of Toronto and Ontario and other places, but not of that particular city. So it filled a hole for the publisher, but they also understood who they were going to sell it to. And some of these comp titles were other books they had published, so that helped them. They already knew some of those demographics. Now, what about when it's indie? When it's indie, I still do the same thing. I still think about that. Yeah, I'm in control, I'm in charge. But this is the thing. This is Active Reader. It's a collection of short stories. Twilight Zone kind of tells about books and bookish locations, because I'm kind of a book nerd and I love book places. So my target audience for this kind of book would be people who like creepy stories, people who enjoy short stories. Again, that's part of a demographic, as opposed to longer ones and novels. Book nerds, people who just love bookish locations and whatever, and that's my ideal reader, is somebody who falls into all of those realms is probably going to like that. And therefore, maybe they were fans of the Twilight Zone or Black Mirror or shows like that. Maybe they enjoy short story collections, they like things related to bookstores and libraries, etc. And so again, even though I wasn't pitching it to a publisher when I'm talking about my book, when I'm sharing about my book. Anyway, how many of you guys saw James Owen's Eggs Benedict talk yesterday? When you're talking to readers about your book, you're taking pride in what it is, and you're saying, yes, this book is perfect for those people who love this kind of Eggs Benedict. They want that sort of thing. And so you can still use that in your marketing when you're trying to target people and talk about your books. The two main paths, there are multiple paths, but the two main paths that we have are traditional publishing, obviously, and self or indie publishing. Now, just at a high level, the one is highly selective. There's gatekeepers. It may take years for the book to be published. You're hoping and begging and pleading, please, sir, would you please publish my manuscript? And it goes through slush piles and submissions and rejections. It may involve agents, and it usually involves territorial rights. They may not buy world rights. They may buy specific rights. It usually involves distribution into bookstores and libraries, which is pretty much something we have very big difficulty doing as indie authors, except for some of the people here today presenting this week who talk about how they help you with that. And then there's a payment in advance, and usually, so the publisher is the purveyor of all the risk. They're investing in you, they're investing in your book, and they want to, as a business, want to make that money back. So it's your job, when you're pitching it to them, to show them how your book's going to help them make that money back. When you're self-publishing, when you're indie publishing, it's all the same things. You need to have the editors and the designers and all the things, but you're in control. You're the publisher. You get to decide, and you don't have to wait for a 4-season selling cycle of somebody selling to a buyer at Barnes & Noble in New York to sell books in May that they're going to put in their bookstores at Christmas. If you're writing books and can release them at certain speeds, you don't have to wait for a year to get that next book out. You can sort of match the needs of your readers and the needs of your ability to write. It may not be once a year, it may be multiple times a year, it may be every couple years, but you get to set that pace and decide. And you can change it. You can change things as you go along. You also earn higher margins. So for my traditionally published books, I usually make 8%. And there's a 30% withholding fee, and I get paid once a year on those. But when I publish directly to Amazon or directly to Kobo, or I use a distributor, I'm getting paid usually every 45 to 90 days. And so one of the benefits that I see in doing both is I'm getting paid many different ways from many different sources. If it was just traditional publishing, oh boy, I'd have to wait a year to get the money, but every month money is flowing and rolling in. So there are two main paths you can do, but the cool thing is there's no one way to do it. You can do both. You can change the path if you want. You can decide for different books that this may be something I work with a publisher on. This may be something I self-publish. You can choose and change. You're completely in control, because at the end of the day, you're licensing your book to a publisher. And that's what I want you to understand, is that IP, that creation of that product is something that you can sell to a publisher, and that is something you can partner with retailers and distributors if you want to self-publish. And you can do both, especially if a publisher doesn't buy the rights, because it's yours. You owned it. You wrote it. You can license it, you can DIY it, sometimes with short fiction. You sell it to a publisher, you get the rights back, you can republish it. I love Dean Wesley Smith's Magic Bakery, where he talks just a little bit about slicing things off and having multiple pies and all those things. And he talks a little bit about that, but just remember, the book itself is just one of the many things you can do with it. Now, I licensed Haunted Hamilton to a publisher, and they have audiobook rights, which they've never exploited. They have ebook rights, and they don't know how to sell ebooks because they overprice them, but they sell a lot of print books for me. But when I got approached by voicemap.com to do a virtual GPS guided walking tour of haunted locations, well, I couldn't do the book, but I could take the research I used to write the book and rewrite the tales of the places that were in the book, so that when you go in front of the armories in Hamilton, Ontario, and you open up the VoiceMap app, you hear, "Hi, this is Mark Leslie. I'm the author of Haunted Hamilton, and I'm going to take you on some stories that I talk about in the book, but also some other stories. It's a half-hour guided walking tour. Let's go." So even though I licensed the rights and I'm not able to self-publish Haunted Hamilton anywhere, I can still use the IP that generated Haunted Hamilton. So don't forget that the book is just one aspect about that. When you are reviewing a contract with a publisher, a key thing to remember is that the contract is not set in stone. The contract is a flexible negotiation, and you are allowed to change what you ask for. When I signed my first contract, I was so excited, but there was one problem, is they said, we have the right of refusal, the right to publish your next book. And I said, well, I can't do that because I have a smaller publisher I'm working with who is publishing my next novel. But if you change that, you can have the right of refusal on my next nonfiction book of ghost stories. And so they revised the contract, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool, so I can have the best of both worlds. And all the right of refusal is they get to look at it first, and they have the right of refusal. It doesn't mean I have to accept. They just have the right of first refusal. And so I did that, and then I learned from Christine Catherine Rush later on. The next one, there were 12 different clauses in the contract. I learned from reading chriswrites.com, her blog, and I asked for 12 different things. And I had one big publisher, traditionally published book, and big publisher meaning Canada's largest independent publisher, so it's a small publisher. But I only had one book out, and I thought, well, who am I to ask for these 12 clause changes? You know who I am? I'm the creator of this content, and if they want to publish my thing, we have to work together as a partner. So it's a negotiation. I asked for 12 things, they gave me 10. Nobody. That's an important thing early on in the career. Now, the two things they wouldn't give me were the audiobook rights and the ebook rights. I wanted to keep them because I know I could do a better job than them. But they kept them anyways, but that's fine. I keep asking, and I will keep asking because I know they can do print better than I can, but I can definitely do digital better than they can. Now, when you're publishing directly to a retailer, direct to Amazon, direct to other retailers, when you're publishing through a distributor, you are signing an agreement, a contract that allows them, that gives them permission to sell your book. That's an important thing to remember. It's a partnership, it's a relationship, it's a contract. But you're the publisher, they're not the publisher. They're the retailer, you're the publisher and the author. So you're many, many hats. The terms you're usually agreeing to, light bulb. Oh, thank you, a light bulb. Thank you for yelling out the light bulb. There's a light bulb moment. You're agreeing to the fact that you're the publisher and you're allowing them the rights to sell, publish the book in the format. And I have the rights to publish this. I didn't license them to anyone. I own this. This is my property. I can change it at any time, and they can choose whether or not to sell it. They don't have to. Just because they have a self-publishing platform doesn't mean they have to sell your book. It's their business. They can do whatever they want, so they can choose. And that's in the contract, because I've actually had to read them all, but most of us haven't. But that is there. They can decide not to sell something if they don't want to. But the one clause that's really important, this is why the light bulb is there, is when you're publishing an ebook, it has to be the same price on every platform. It cannot be lower on any other retail site. So if you're running price promos, you're obligated by the contract to do that. Now, Amazon's the only one that will viciously and aggressively automatically price match, but it doesn't mean the other ones. I mean, Kobo's Canadian, so they'll apologize to you if you have a wrong price, but then they'll ask you please and they'll offer you poutine and maple syrup and stuff to change your price. But legally, they can just price match the lowest price anywhere. But also for ebooks, it can't be lower than any other. But now, the key thing to remember, because we're often ebook driven, is that does not exist for print books, and that does not exist for audiobooks. So that's a cool thing. And in a lot of places, you can't control the price of the audiobook on Audible, but you can on pretty much every other platform, like Chirp, run by BookBub. Now, intellectual property rights, so traditional contracts are usually divided up by territories, and that's an important thing to understand. Agents often earn more money for you and for themselves by splitting your rights and having Random House Canada pay a certain amount for it and Random House US, and if they want to do the two together, that should be a bigger deal. But they often will split territorial rights, which means even if you do work with a publisher, check to see if they're asking for international rights, but they don't actually distribute in international locations, why give them international rights? Maybe they only need North American rights, which allows you to log in directly to Kindle Direct Publishing, to Draft to Digital, directly to Kobo, a whole bunch of platforms where you can say, okay, Penguin Random House has the rights to sell this book in North America in ebook format. I have the rights to sell it everywhere else. And you can do that exclusionary pricing. So again, it's not all or none. You can actually play that. Now, most platforms allow that control, and also similarly, international pricing is really important. Now, for ebook publishing, if you opt into exclusivity with Amazon, what you are doing is you're signing a contract that says, I will not publish this ebook to any other platform for 90 days. And you're locked in. You can't sell it directly. You can't sell it on any other website. It's not the end of the world because it's only 90 days. You haven't given away your soul. You've just locked yourself in for 90 days. And it's a rolling term. You can keep doing tours of duty if it's working for you. If not, you can change it. So again, you can change your mind. You're in control. That's really important. I want to high level talk about some formats and obvious blatant self-promotion with one of my latest books. But you've got ebook, you've got print, and you've got audio. And so with ebook, the actual only ebook format, there used to be two. There's .epub and .mobi. .mobi was basically Amazon's proprietary version for an EPUB. It's just an EPUB with proprietary stuff slapped on it, but they're retiring it. There still exists, and so you'll see that. But I just wanted you to know those are the only actual real ebooks. A lot of traditional publishers will call a PDF an ebook. Now I will give them this. It is an electronic file. That's true, but it's not an ebook. A PDF is usually a fixed layout format, usually designed to send to a printer to print. And so you will hear that. I was actually at a college last week, and I panicked and I freaked out when the teacher said, the writing and publishing class said, no, PDFs are ebooks. No, they're not ebooks. They're digital files. Now, with print production, most authors are usually going to use print on demand. We can't afford to do offset printing, 5,000, 10,000 copies, and put them in our garages or our basements or whatever. So most of the printing we're going to do is print on demand, which means the order comes in, you put the digital file up somewhere, and then a customer orders it, it gets printed and shipped and delivered. Now, the margins tend to be, the cost per unit's a little higher, because if you're printing 5,000 or 10,000 copies, the cost will be lower. That's why mass market, the little pocketbooks you find in bookstores are, it's cheaper to destroy them than it is to return them to the publisher, because the economics are just different there. And most traditional publishers will use offset or digital offset printing, which means higher volumes, warehousing, large quantities. They have to invest in a place to store them to get shipped and distributed. But if you're self-publishing with print, you're typically going to be doing print on demand. The formats for print are trade paperback. This is the most common one you're going to use if you're an indie author. Hardcover, which you can get through KDP Print or Ingram Spark. Those are the two most common right now. Eventually, draft to digital print will add that. Large print, again, type of print file, usually a larger trim size, larger font size as well. And there are a lot of people, even though every ebook can be a large print book, there are people who will prefer to read print. And the majority of readers today still read print. So that's an important thing to remember. So just because it's in ebook format doesn't mean that you're making your book accessible. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then mass market. Now we can do mass market sizes through KDP Print, through Ingram Spark. But they're actually technically not mass market books. Mass market books are usually when they print 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 copies of it. They're still print on demand. They're just mass market size as well. But you may hear that kicked around. Audio is typically digital. It's an MP3 for most indie authors. And here's the cool thing about audio. There isn't just one. It can be a single narrator, which is the most common. A duet, two narrators doing it. Multicast, dramatic performances. Think of radio plays with sound effects and stuff like that added in. And historically, audiobooks were produced in physical format on cassettes and CDs as well. So every single one of those would be a unique product. And I'm going to get into that for ISBNs in a second. But formats are important to understand because this is really, really important. It ensures your readers have choice. It ensures additional discoverability. Thinking about your Amazon page. When you see a book that only has an ebook available, but you see a book that has an ebook and a trade paperback and a hardcover and an audiobook, it looks real, it looks more, it looks bigger. And that's one of the things, because there may be some people who only go for the audiobook, or maybe large print as well. They will read it if it's available in large print. So again, it just allows that availability in all the different formats. Ebooks can be any size. This is also an important thing. It does not have to be defined as 300 pages bound between two pieces of cloth. It can be short, it can be long. You can experiment with that in ebook and in audio, which is also digital, and this is just a blatant self-promotion image for Taking the Short Tack, which is a book I co-authored with Maddie Dalrymple, which is just about exploiting those short fiction rates. Because a lot of times, especially when I started, you would want to sell a lot of short stories to markets and then earn a name for yourself before you get a publishing deal. And so I had a lot of stories, and I had a lot that I got the rights back, and so what do I do with them? ISBN, just high level, I'm going to go through this really fast. An ISBN is a fingerprint for a book. It stands for International Standard Book Number. It's usually, it looks like an EAN barcode on the back of a book. A Bookland EAN is what it's called. In Bookland, by the way, the special code for Bookland is 978 or 979. Used to be 10 digits. And the last number in an ISBN is a check digit. It's a mathematical calculation. And back in the old day, this is the old trivia thing you can use for a bar bet, is the X in an ISBN 10, the old shorter versions. They started switching them around 1999. The X was a Roman numeral for 10, because it was 0 through 10. Now, they don't have 10 in 13-digit ISBN land, so that's why you won't see a 13-digit ISBN with X's on them. So that's another bet you can win there. But every format gets its own unique ISBN. Hardcover, trade paperback, mass market, EPUB. Now, for traditional publishers, they may also assign ISBNs to PDFs. That's so cute. And audio by format, so digital, CD, cassette. And then again, I may have a multicast narrated one, a single narrated one. Those are all going to get their own unique ISBNs. Now, ISBNs in the US cost $125. They're purchased through Bowker, which kind of controls ISBNs internationally. And if you buy them one by one, they're about $125 US. There's discounts when you buy them in bulk. You can get deals through Ingram Spark to buy them in bulk, et cetera, et cetera. In other countries, they're going to be different prices, but they're always based on $125 US. You don't need an ISBN if you're publishing an ebook. You will get assigned an ASIN by Amazon anyways. They'll give out a free ISBN if they're publishing a print book. Draft to Digital, Smashwords will provide a free ISBN. You can purchase ISBNs through Ingram Spark if you bring your own, etc. Now, Canadians, we get them for free. In the US, you may have the right to bear arms, but we have the right to bear ISBNs. So there you go. Yeah, so there you. But that's an important thing, because the Canada Council for the Arts buys them in bulk from Bowker to give to them. Draft to Digital buys ISBNs in bulk, so we can give them to you for free as well. Now, you can publish a book for free. And I would just be wary about this, because when you do, you're putting your stuff out there in the world available for everyone to see, and that can damage your reputation. So just be careful. You can do it for free, and maybe you want to experiment with some stuff a little bit, but just be careful about how that can damage your reputation, because it may pay in the long term to invest in the product. And that's where I wanted to kind of briefly share cost and investment. So let's say anywhere from $300 to $500 at the lower end, $1,500 to $5,000 at the higher end, depending on your cover designer, your editor, and all the things, and the bartering you may do to get, things done. A book selling for $5 in ebook format, where you're making $3.49 on how many copies do you need to sell? And that's just a thing to understand. And it may not, depending on your goals. Your goals may just be to get the book out there, and who cares if I make money back? But if your goal is to make money back, understand I need to sell 300 copies. Or 86 copies to make back $300. I need to sell 143 to make 500, et cetera, et cetera. And am I going to try and make that back in the first 90 days? Am I going to make it back in the first 6 months, in the first 10 years? It can vary, and there is no one answer. It's just what you're comfortable with as part of your business plan, of your understanding. Now, don't forget to factor in the cost of ads. If you run ads, if you pay for BookBub ads or Facebook ads or Amazon ads, that comes out of your margin. So yeah, I had to sell 153, but I had to pay this extra money. So that's additional calculations you should be paying attention to. And again, if you're running it like a business and understanding that, understand. And even in some cases, be very skeptical and leery when somebody says, I make $100,000 a month selling books, ebooks. And you say, yeah, I spend $95,000 a month selling ebooks. I mean, that's good. They're actually making more money than most people do, because they're still profiting $5,000. But how many of us have $95,000 to put on a credit card this month to get paid 90 days later? So it's a risk. So you have to always be aware of those kinds of things. So if you're comparing yourself to someone who's doing that, just be aware they're probably spending a significant amount of money to get there. They're probably profiting because they're smart business people, but just be aware of that, and don't be hard on yourself. You go, well, I only made $20 this month, but I didn't spend anything to make it. So that's pure $20. The hidden costs are things that also disturb me or bother me, because I can throw $10 a day in and run an Amazon ad or something like that, but to do it effectively, follow Brian Cohen or any of the gurus who do really good stuff with Amazon marketing and stuff like that, it's the labor that gets me. I got to spend an extra half hour or an hour every day going in and tweaking and looking at it and adjusting it and stuff like that. And A, I'm not good at it. B, I hate that work. So it's not my cup of tea. But I may pay Written Word Media some money and just have them take care of it in a newsletter. And so that $50 instead of 5 days of $10 ads or a $50 single ad involves minimal labor. So I make business decisions. Yeah, I still run ads, but I understand I'm not going to be optimizing the way Mark Dawson does, the way Brian Cohen does, because I'm not going to invest that labor. I'm going to do low-level basic things, understand what my costs are, but I don't have the additional costs, because this kind of comes back to a really important thing is, would I be better off writing? And chances are, yes, you would be better. Now, if you're really, really good at it and you love analytics and this is something that gets you up in the morning, then you're probably going to be really good at that and it's not wasted time. But for someone like me, I'm better off writing the next book. Tracking is important, and it's really important to start tracking before you've published a book or as you're publishing your first book. Because how many of you guys saw Dale Meyer the other day in the panel? 250 books published with another 50. You know Dale's tracking everything, and thank goodness she started tracking years ago and she didn't have to start now. Because for each book, how many different formats does she have? Where are they published? Who are they published through? What are the prices? When she runs a price promo for Kobo Australia, what's the Australian price now? What's the regular price? What is it going to go down? I'm not going to give you the tools, but there's different tracking things. You can use Google, you can use spreadsheets. There's different tools you can use for that. But start tracking now while you have one book out or while you're about to publish a book, because if you wait until you've got 10 or 20, it's going to multiply the work and it's going to be overwhelming for you. Even if you change the tracking, at least you have the information somewhere. And I would say tracking your correspondence with people. I used to track submissions to publishers and when I got my rejection and what the expected time was and when I got my rejection and when I got my rejection and when I got my rejection, when it was published. Because when I republish these, I put the little thing, this was originally published in this magazine on this date, etc., which is just a professional thing that you do. But all of that correspondence can come in if you start tracking it early. The most powerful tool you'll probably ever have as an author, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, is an author newsletter, a way for you to reach your readers directly, a way for you to connect with them. Because the retailers are awesome. I love them to death, and they're providing opportunities we've never had before, especially in self-publishing, but their business is selling books to whatever, or not books in some cases. Their business is not in selling your books. So as much as they're awesome, they don't care about you. They care about selling the right book to the right reader. You may be the right writer at the right time, but you may not be. But you can never reach out to them. You don't have access to them unless you're able to email them directly. That can be good for direct sales. It could be good for pushing your sales on the various platforms. So if you're in a Kobo promo, for example, you can say, hey, I'm in a Kobo promo, and you can let them know about it. Kobo's going to let people know, but they're also going to let them know about the big sale. You can let them know you're in that sale and guide them to your book on that website. I also think there's a lot of comparisonitis that happens. It's like, oh, I have 50,000 people on my newsletter. And I've done things to try to get people to my newsletter, but every single time I've added 10,000 readers to my newsletter, I got 10,000 people who wanted a free book and didn't care who I was or what the book was. They just wanted a free book. And of those 10,000 people, maybe 100 of them went on to be real fans, diehard fans. So I would rather have 10 actual people who read my stuff and love my stuff and follow the links and engage with me than 1,000 freegans who are just there for a free book. So I'm often working really, really hard to figure out who the people are who actually want to hear from me specifically, as opposed to just any free book that they can get. But an author newsletter is also one of the most powerful tools you'll have. The reality of publishing is that it is possible to make 5 and 6 and 7 figures from your self-publishing as an author, especially in indie and self-publishing. It's probably easier there than it is in traditional publishing. But the reality is that indie publishing, self-publishing, it doesn't matter. About 20% of the books published will make 80% of the revenue, and most of the books published are not going to make a lot. So if you're thinking, well, I only made a few $100 this month or whatever, you're actually doing pretty good. That's a really important thing to remember. Now, I'm not saying this to poo-poo anyone or to say this is impossible and it's going to hurt, because it's probably easier in traditional, in indie publishing to make higher amounts of money than ever before, but it's not. It's a lot of hard work. You're more likely to get more margin in indie publishing. You're more likely to get a book in bookstores with traditional publishers, but you may not make as much off of it. So you're balancing that, the vanity of being in a bookstore as opposed to actually getting money. in your pocket. And I like having both. It's a really good thing, because actually being both has doubled my income. I would probably be making half of what I make today. I only make a mid-5 figures, so I'm not saying like I'm a big rich author and you should do everything I say. No, you shouldn't do anything anyone says. You do what works for you. But I'm saying that it would probably be about half of what I make if I was only indie publishing or I was only traditional publishing. So for me, it's helped significantly. But the key thing, because I don't want you to give up, I said, yeah, it's going to be hard to sell. It's going to take a long time. Doesn't happen overnight. Patience, practice, and persistence are the 3 things I like to say are really, really important. There's a free book available, 3 free books, one of mine, which has 3 of those P's of publishing success, and a book from Kevin Tumlinson, the 30-day author, and another one from Nick Thacker, BookBub Mastery. And if you go to d2d.tips/conference, you can download those books for free. I'll read that out again later on, but I just wanted to, I'm a little bit over, but I wanted to remind you that you have always had the power. Digital has helped enhance that. I just want you to use your gifts wisely and to make the decisions that work best for you and your particular situation, rather than anything that works for me or for anyone else that you hear from. You're going to hear from already, I've heard some amazing people here. Take it, adapt it to your own needs. Just make sure you use it wisely, and it can last for a long, long time. So I'm as sure that there's people who had specific questions, and that's why you're here. I do promise I will answer them here if you come up to the mic, or if not, I'll have to repeat it. But please ask your questions, and if not, I can get you in the hallway afterwards. Okay, yay, we got someone going to ask a question. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for this talk. My question is, you said in terms of costs for self-publishing, you had 300 to 500 on the lower end, and then 500 to 1,500, or 5,000 rather, on the higher end. What is included in those costs?
That's just a high level. Like, it could just be cover design, basic, high level proofreading, like really, really cheap, not developmental editing. Usually a more expensive editor is going to cost you more. I mean, I've paid as little as $300. Sometimes I've got what I paid for. I was just trying to give a range, because everyone's going to find different things, right? My very first book cover cost me $24. My best friend did, because he's a graphic designer, and it was a case of beer. Right now I get my covers for $150 US, so, and I've paid way more for covers in the past. So that's just sort of a high level view, because, yeah, just to give you an idea.
Okay, and then one follow-up question, which is, you mentioned like advertising.
Yeah.
So is the advertising spend extra beyond?
Yeah, that's a good,
Okay.
yeah, that's why I said that the advertising definitely was on top. That was just the production and making the books and getting them ready in the design and all that stuff. Because there are a lot of free tools that you can use to get those done. But yeah, the advertising is on top of that. So you start with that, and then you're like, okay, if I'm advertising, I got to add other costs in. Yeah, great question, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for asking. Any other specifics? Way in the back, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, the free slides. Thank you, the free slides. The slides are all free. d2d.tips. You don't need to just go into a URL, put in d2d.tips/conference. There's a lot of great information. So the other thing I glossed over this, thanks for asking. You get the 3 free books. They're all bundled in that really less attractive cover than the other ones that we have there. They're all bundled together so you can read them for free. But there's also a promo form on Drafted Digital. If you happen to use Drafted Digital for library or some retail platforms, you fill out a form and tell us, hey, I published to this platform through you in this genre. And then Megan, who runs our promos, will look at that, and if there's promos available coming up, we'll send an email invite to you, which will go in your spam folder. But then we'll also share it on the Wide for the Win group on Facebook, usually. Thanks for asking.
So, with traditional publishing,
Yes.
I had spoken with a couple of authors who said that you still have to do a ton of the
Yes.
legwork for your marketing and all of that stuff.
Yes.
Is there any tip that you would give us that would kind of give you a great understanding of how to start that
Thank you. Yeah, so it used to be in the pretend days of publishing, because it never really was this way. You'd turn your manuscript in, the publisher would do all the work, and you get all the marketing. The reality is, one of the things the publisher's looking for, and that's why I use that Venn diagram, is if the publisher understands you know how to market the book, you're probably going to also market the book. And they were like, I think one of the reasons why my pitch to Dundurn worked, and it was a one-page pitch. I'm going to write this book, this is what it's going to be, blah, 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 blah. They probably looked out and saw that I was hustling already. I had a website. I had self-published 2 books by then. I was doing stuff. I was constantly promoting. They want you to promote the book because it's a partnership. They will invest in you. Now, one of the best marketing tips or strategies that works for me and several authors I know is define yourself as a big fish in a small pool. Start with your hometown. Go back to your high school, your college. How many people want to write a book? Everyone thinks they can write a book. How many people actually do? Very few. You're here. You're working on a book or have written a book. You've done it. Most people won't. You're a big deal. The smaller you go back to your community. So Sudbury, Ontario is where I'm from. It's a small, of all the traditionally published books I have, Cobb, Montreal is the second largest city in Canada, Montreal, and I probably sell more, even 6 years or 8 years after Spooky Sudbury first came out, I sell more of that book per year in a smaller town, 90,000 people, than I do in millions of people in a larger. So the smaller the community, define yourself smaller, go local. The story of you as an author to your local community, being willing to go and talk at your local library, all of those things are really, really important. And it seems small, but I sent a press release to a local free circular that they throw at the end of our driveway with a whole bunch of flyers every week. They're hurting for content. They ran my press release as a special and put it on the front page. They even included my author photo on the front page. Next thing I knew, I got a call from the local television show morning host that broadcasts to most of the province of Ontario saying, hey, I saw the thing in the Mountain Times. Would you like to come on TV tomorrow? We had a cancellation. Could you come and bring your skeleton and tell some ghost story? It was close to Halloween. But by providing this local minimal content that usually ends up in the bottom of the cat litter box, it got me onto TV 3 days before my book launch. I actually had 200 people show up at my book launch, which is, if I get more than my mom and one other person, that's a pretty good deal. And that's because I worked with the really, really small local community content, and that eventually led to somebody seeing it somewhere. And that's an important thing. So I hope that helped a little bit with some ideas. 3.5 minutes, if there's any other questions. Yeah, more questions. I like that.
Can you talk a little bit more about target audience?
Target audience?
Traditional versus indie?
Okay. Well, target audience, readers are readers, and readers don't go into bookstores and say, I'm looking for this book from HarperCollins. I'm looking for this book that Mark self-published. They just know authors and titles and what they want to read. So target audience is usually trying to identify from existing titles, and usually when you're talking to booksellers or librarians or even publishers. So we all know who Mark Dawson is, right? He's pretty rich, he does really good, he's helped a lot of authors, and he sells like crazy. The average reader, as awesome and amazing as he is, the average reader has no clue who he is. They don't know who Diane Capri is, even though she's an awesome author and writes whatever, but they've heard of Lee Child. So they may be good comp authors in our settings, because we all know who they are, but the average reader has never heard of those people. So trying to think of the names that even people who don't read books have heard of, that's a place to start when you're thinking about target audience. You have to start with a big name like Stephen King and Suzanne Collins, stuff like that, like all the different names that other people would probably have heard of before you narrow it into the more niche areas.
I was just curious because in your target audience for traditional, you had people who love Hamilton, for example.
Oh, how do I target people who love Hamilton? Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because how do you target people who love Hamilton? So on Facebook, I can do things like where they live. I can look for keywords, stuff like that. That's in the press releases. That's in sort of when I go to pitch to be on a local radio. Well, I've got 10 creepy ghost stories about Hamilton for people who love the city or love history or whatever. So it is harder, but understanding who they are first and then trying to figure out where they hang out, what they do. Are they on certain groups online? Can I be part of that community and interact with them? Again, nobody wakes up wanting to be sold to, but people wake up wanting, usually to have cool experiences, right? And so I always look at, I don't want to sell anything to people, I want to give them a cool experience, and maybe they realize that I'm a writer too, and if they're a reader, then maybe they'll want to read my stuff. So It is hard. There's no direct, and that's the thing, is there's no direct, do this, do that, do the other thing. But first start by understanding who they are, then start to look and see where do they hang out, what do they do. Well, maybe they read the local paper. Maybe I advertise in the local paper as opposed to an Amazon ad where I have to go way up here to target them there. So maybe the spend and the energy might be better suited in that local circular where an ad is a lot cheaper. So.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
No one else does. Author newsletter.
Yes.
So,
Oh.
Important tool, but at one point, if you're like a beginner author, when do you launch that? Is it after you've published your first book, your first series, and then you launch the author newsletter?
There's no one answer to how to do that. You could launch it and talk about the process of writing and the research and all the fun you're having because, again, you're entertaining them. You're providing valuable content for people who may be interested in you and the books you're sharing. So, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we are at 16 seconds, so I want to give you guys time to do like loud applause and stuff and make it seem like, yeah. So thank you guys. I do want to clear the stage so they can get rid of me and get on with the next person. But if you have any questions, I'll mosey on my way to the back of the room so we can talk. Thank you again so much.